Welcome back to our Hearts of Iron 4 video guide, tutorial, strategy, template, walkthrough thing. Anyway, so today we're going to be covering support companies, as you can tell by the title and the thumbnail, what all of them do, how to use all of them, and pretty good examples of when to use them. So we're going to be using this help me hit 50k subs wink kind of template here, and we're going to be adding a single support company each time and covering and showing you guys the difference when you add them and what they actually all do. So first off, let's talk about engineer companies, which if you did not know where they are for some reason, basically under your support, they're the very first one here. Now, whenever you upgrade them, pretty much it's the same bonuses, but they give an extra entrenchment. That's really about it. So, what is the entrenchment bonus first off? If you didn't know, whenever a division is on the defense, it gets this what's called entrenchment bonus, which is really boosted up because of engineer companies. Instead of being 20%, if we don't have an engineer company, it's down right here to only 10. So, what other differences does it make? With our help me hit 50k subs template, wink, we're going to be showing you guys what happens when you add them to a, well, division. Basically, they give a movement bonuses when you look at, let's see here, the little boot thing in the bottom left shows a movement bonus, which means it can go through that zone that much faster instead of having to deal with the attrition and all that in there. The middle one is the attack bonus, and then the one on the right is a defense bonus. So whenever we look at forest, you get a plus 5% movement and plus 25% defense. When we go to hills, you only get a plus 10% defense. Jungles, you get a plus 25% defense. Marshes, you get a plus 20% movement and defense for 25%. Now this is the one that I didn't know for a while until recently. Forts, they give an attack bonus and a defense bonus, and then amphibious landings, they give a plus 25% attack bonus for your naval invasions, which make them incredibly important for Marines, but then they also give a river bonus for movement and defense. Now, the further on you go when you're using engineer companies, you will see here, let me actually move this down here. When you're using engineer companies, you get bigger bonuses, like the second one gives you more bonuses for attacking and defending forts, the third one gives you more bonuses for attacking and defending on rivers, and then the fourth one gives you bonuses for attacking urban and defending in urban areas. So next up, let's talk about probably, in my opinion, what is the least important support company in the game, and that is a recon company, and I'm going to explain why. So the idea behind a recon company, it actually says it right here. Well, actually it doesn't. Basically, the reason you're supposed to use recon companies is because they increase your reconnaissance, and it says it's the ability to scout ahead and anticipate the enemy, increase the chance that this unit can pick better tactics in battle. The idea behind using this is what it's supposed to end up doing is whenever you attack somebody, for example, if you click the little bubble, there's tactics going back and forth in the top of it. Now, if someone attacks you and you have a much higher reconnaissance than them, what's supposed to happen is you'll be able to counter it. And then if you counter it correctly, your division will be given penalties or bonuses, and the enemy division will be given penalties pretty much, and it will help you win the battle a lot easier. Now, unfortunately, through my testing where I've tried it in the past, it doesn't really work that well. Even with the level 4 radio company and a signal company, or not radio, but a recon company and a level 4 signal company, it really didn't make any kind of difference in the battles whatsoever when I tested it. So maybe other people have had different experiences, but I'm going to cover what I know for a fact it does. So if we add them to our, again, help me hit 50k subs template, recon companies. As you can see here, they do increase breakthrough, defense, hard attack, soft attack, and the HP slightly. However, they do obviously take your org down a little bit, but your reconnaissance goes up, which again, in my opinion, it doesn't really matter that much. Now, here's the big area why I use recon companies sometimes, ignoring all these stats up here. Basically, it's just this a bonus towards movement you get, which is actually sometimes pretty helpful. So, on top of the engineer company, which already would give you about, I would say, a 15% bonus later on, you could get this one, which will boost you up to 25. So you get a movement in jungles, plains, mountains, hills, forest, marshes, desert, and rivers. So basically, engineer companies are good for movement, defending naval invasions, all that kind of stuff. Recon companies, in my opinion, are only good to give more bonuses to movement. Next up, let's talk about a military police division. So basically, military police is a support company in this game, which is mostly, the only reason it's there is to increase your suppression. Now, what is suppression? You're probably wondering. Basically, if you're an Axis country and you're just straight up annexing land when you invade somewhere, what's going to happen is there's going to be resistance in that territory. Now, when you go in that territory and there is resistance, it can do things like damage areas and stuff, and military police increases your suppression, so you're able to stop that. Next up, let's talk about maintenance companies, and they're probably actually a lot more important than people realize in this game. So what are maintenance companies? Basically, they increase the reliability of your troops, as you can see right here in the template, and on top of that, they also give you bonuses for capturing enemy equipment. Now, basically, with a maintenance company, every time you go into your research and you upgrade your maintenance company, which is right here, each one increases both the capture ratio and reliability 5%. So, that sounds great, but how could you use that to your advantage? Basically, let's say you have a tank here and you want to keep the reliability at, say, 80%. Well, if you keep the reliability at 80% and you keep upgrading things, let's just say we upgrade our gun a couple times, then our armor, and you still, oh no, it's down to 64. Well, if you have a level 4 maintenance company, you can actually kind of ignore this a little bit, because that's going to add 20% reliability to the template, which means this will still be 64% plus 20%, which will be 84%. So that's basically the way you're supposed to use maintenance companies in the game, but also they have another purpose as well if we add it in here. Like I said, again, maintenance companies, they increase the amount of equipment captured as well, which helps tremendously if, say, you're the Soviet Union, for example, and you're really low on guns. Well, then if you're pushing the enemy back, you can get about 20% of their guns back from whatever divisions you're using to attack, and so on, and that does help out sometimes, but really outside of those areas, maintenance companies aren't good for very much. But it's not just places that have attrition, which people don't know, where maintenance companies come in handy. As you can see here, we have 29 divisions, and they're all training. None of them have any of those divisions. This is just over the course of about training for a little bit over a month. And if we just let it play, as you can see, that's going up quite a bit. Even though none of our divisions are suffering attrition, this is just simply the amount of equipment lost regardless, which you can see most of the time if you hover over the equipment. As you can see, reliability 90%. So if you have 2 maintenance companies in your divisions, you're not going to really be losing any rifles. You'll still lose a couple, but you're going to have 100% reliability of the rifles inside of your divisions, and you don't really have to worry about losing too many of them when you're training anymore. Now, as you can see in the background, what I'm doing is to test. The templates on the top actually are the exact same thing as the ones on the bottom, except the theater on the top does not have any maintenance companies. The ones on the bottom have level 2 maintenance companies, so their reliability is at 100%. And as you can see, when comparing the two after they've both been training for around a month, it is pretty obvious that the maintenance companies, whenever applied to something like rifles, do help tremendously stop the amount of rifles lost whenever you're training or in combat. Now let's talk about field hospitals, which by far, in my opinion, are one of the most important support companies in the game and work tremendously well if you know what you're doing with them. Basically, they give you 2 huge bonuses. They give you trickle back and then EXP loss. Now, here's what happens. The EXP loss is not what you think. It's actually removing the penalties, and essentially, whenever your division loses troops in battle, there are 2 things that come into account. One, well actually there's a lot more, but one of the things that come into account are the amount of trickleback. Number 2 is the EXP loss. Now, the XP loss, whatever that number is negative, that means that is how much pretty much you'll save of your army experience compared to just losing it all. What ends up happening is whenever a division is in combat and they lose any kind of men whatsoever, troops are sent to reinforce them. Now, depending on how many troops they lost in battle, sometimes the experience of the division will go down if they lost because they're losing men and they're not successfully winning. And what ends up happening are there's actually about 5 levels in the game. 1 level is Rookie, which is a negative 25% modifier in combat. Level 2 is Trained, which is what all divisions are when they get done with training. Level 3 are, I believe, Veterans or Veteracy or something like that, which is a plus 25% bonus, and then another one, and then a level 5 bonus, which is plus 50% bonus. Now, this is why it's such a big deal. When you realize how much XP you can lose in battle, and then realize that if you're losing, you're not going to want to give up the pretty much barely being able to hold on with trained troops to now jumping down to a negative 25% modifier in combat. In my opinion, it's much better to have probably level 2 logistics companies, or correction, field hospitals, and that way you'll end up saving 30%, or correction, 20%. Basically, each level, the first level you get, it's a 20% trickle back, and then a 10% XP loss thing. And then after that, it's basically 10% trickle back, and then 10% of the XP bonus. After that, you can pretty much get to level 5 and you'll have a 50% trickle back and a 40% XP loss retention. Now, what is trickle back? Whenever a battle happens, you lose, say for example, let's just say in a war you lost 100,000 men. If your trickle back for all your templates is 20%, of those 100,000 men, you'll get 20,000 men back. Basically, that is the amount of troops that are lost when they have a field hospital that you will actually get returned into your manpower pool up at the top. Next up is logistics companies, which are probably another thing that are incredibly important and probably actually almost as important as adding field hospitals depending on where you're fighting. Basically, logistics companies, each level that you unlock of logistics companies will do two things. First, they will remove 10% of basically the supply required for the division, and then negative 5% for the fuel that is used by the division. Now, obviously, supply is a big issue in Hearts of Iron 4, however, adding a logistics company, usually about level 2, will solve the problem the majority of the time, and this is why. Basically, whenever it lowers that supply enough, you'll be able to see inside of all these different zones on the map. If you go to your logistical map, you'll be able to see that some areas will say have 20 or 30 supply if you look in Asia, and then if you look in North Africa, it's like 20, 30, maybe 40 at most if it's actually built up, and a lot of places in South America are in about the same kind of area. So by adding a logistic company, by removing the amount of supply needed to actually basically supply the troops, you're lowering the supply usage of those troops, the necessary needs for those supply. Well, then it's kind of obvious that the troops, because they have lower supply needed, you can fit more troops in and be able to use more troops at the same time to push through and actually win. Also, a huge bonus of it is the fuel aspect and the idea of that whole thing, especially when you think about adding a level 4 logistics company can remove a negative 20% of the fuel used by a tank division, which would be absolutely massive if it's a 40 width. For the final thing on our list, it is signal companies. Now, they're good for a couple things, and there is a bit of an exploit I'm going to show you guys here, which really does work with signal companies pretty well. When you don't have a signal company, for some reason it doesn't work anywhere close to as good, but it still works nonetheless. Now, what do signal companies do? They actually do a couple things. One, they increase your reinforcement rate and increase the speed of which planning is done. Now, the way that they work is by each level of a signal company, they increase the initiative, which also counts towards both reinforcement rate and the speed of which planning is done. Now, it's not really too big of a difference with the planning speed with only a level 2. You really need a level 3 or 4 to make a very noticeable difference. But it's still a little bit faster and saves you about, I think if I remember correctly, a level 2. If you're trying to get to a 50% standard, like just basic level, I think it's a level 2 bonus, or a level 2 signal company will save you 5 days, level 3 signal company will save you 7 days, and a level 4 signal company will save you 8 days when it's the basic 2% a day to get to a 50% bonus for whenever you're going to try to actually attack. Now, the exploit I was talking about, you can actually hold down control and left click after you've set up already a offensive line somewhere or whatever, and you have it planned to max. Will then set them to do a naval invasion, and that will give you a bonus whenever you land of a planning speed. So if you invade somewhere really close by, you'll get the same bonuses as you would for a naval invasion, or correction, a land invasion for the naval invasion. Anyway guys, thank you so much for watching this video, and hopefully it did clear up some things for you guys out there, and if it did, please don't forget to subscribe, because it's going to help me get close to that beautiful 50,000 subscriber mark, and then maybe, just maybe, in the eyes of I Sorrows, I will actually be worthy to 1v1 him. Or maybe Drew Dunell in a staring contest. Anyway, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Stay awesome.